to be considered a public community meeting. There is a time for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. Can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Here.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes. Will you rise for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda?
We're making one minor adjustment that doesn't really amount to a change. It's just that we're going to have some of the National Merit Recognition students featured at the very beginning because they and their parents are here and they may want to leave once they get that recognition behind them. So we're going to make that to accommodate them.
So we're going to do that now?
Whenever we're ready to go. Mr. Patty, why don't you come up and recognize our kids?
Absolutely, thank you. So each year, I always get to talk about how this is one of the fun presentations that I get to do. It's talking about our students, the accomplishments they've done, the awards they've received. So I'd like to come up here and present it to you all. So we'll start off with our rural scholarship students. So if I could have Jonathan Bettinger, Ruth Brobeck, Aiden Kosher, Parker Pacifico, and Mason Towie, please all stand so you can be recognized. So these students, the Rural Scholarship Award recognizes the National Recognition Program Award and supports students from rural districts in Ohio who demonstrate exceptional academic potential. The scholarship is designed to provide financial assistance to students from smaller rural communities who are committed to pursuing higher education. By awarding this scholarship, we acknowledge that the academic excellence and determination of the students who are often from underrepresented backgrounds in higher education. So congratulations. Our next round of students will be for our Governor's Scholar. So if I could have Ruth Brobeck, Anna Graycon, Martha McKeegan, Andrew Mahovic, Robert Vash, Emily Vieira, and Cora Weimer, all please stand up. The Ohio Governor's Scholar Award is a prestigious recognition of top academic performers in our state. Recipients of this award exemplify outstanding academic achievements, typically maintaining a minimum of 3.5 GPA and demonstrating exceptional performance on standardized tests. Beyond the academic excellence, these students are also recognized for their leadership qualities and community involvement. The award not only provides a monetary support, but it also serves a testament to the hard work and dedication and potential to make a significant contribution to their communities in the state of Ohio. Congratulations. And my last award is for Menno Hawk, and it is for our National Merit Scholarship. So the National Merit Scholarship is a highly competitive national program that recognizes the most academically talented students in the United States. Achieving this honor requires exceptional performance on the PSAT during their junior year, placing students in the top 1% of test takers in their state. Recipients can be named National Merit Finalists, Scholars, and Commended Scholars throughout the program. The scholarship ranges from financial awards to full tuition at various universities. This prestigious recognition highlights not only academic brilliance, but also potential for future success in leadership and higher education and beyond. Congratulations, Menno.
That's amazing.
Yeah. If we could have each of you guys come up, so if we could have the rural scholars first, come on up, go stand with the board, get a picture really quick.
Where should we stand? Where do you think? That wall?
Parker, head right over on, they're gonna have you right over there. All right, now if I could have board stay up there, because we'll have the Governor's Scholar Award recipients head on up there. Good job. Get up there. Yeah. There you go. Come on up there, you're good, you're good. And then board, stay up there. Menno, go on up there for our. Thank you all very much. I really appreciate you coming in.
All right, so that was here.
Thank you. If you choose to, I'm sorry.
That's what you just took the words out of my mouth.
All
That's
right, I was
fine.
going to say, if you choose to stay for the remainder of the board meeting, you're absolutely welcome to. If you would choose to go home at this point in time, you're also free to leave, so it's your choice. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming.
We'll get
Nice
certificates to
job.
you from the board. I'm sorry, Christine, I didn't mean to.
No, that's totally fine. We have some chairs up front if you
There's
all would like
chairs
to
here
sit.
for anyone who wishes to sit. Ready, dude?
I'm just gonna wait for everyone to get settled.
You ready to go with next? Abby, are you here solo? Are you here solo tonight? Yes. Okay.
Okay, so we can just take it from the top.
Yeah, now we're just
Okay,
saying.
so we have the master facility final update presentation by Ms. Abby Ranieri, Mr. Scott Amstutz, and Mr. Bill Prenoso, sorry. It's just Abby? Just Abby.
It is just me, so hi, everybody.
Thanks,
Bill came down sick, so I'm pulling double duty for him today. But we've been approaching the planning process as a team, those of you who have been in the loop on it, so he helped kind of prepare with me this evening. Just as a reminder, my name is Abby Ranieri. I'm representing GPD Group, and we have a brief update, just kind of reminding you all where we've been, and then we've been working really hard over the last several months to finalize the recommended plan and finalize the scope based on some input that we've had from some various district stakeholders over the last couple months. So we'll jump right into it. So very brief agenda. We'll just really quickly touch on kind of how we got here. We'll review where we've landed with the scope for the project, and then we'll talk about the budget, and then really briefly talk about next steps. So summary of the process, we began working with you all in 2022. And so as you recall, we convened a planning committee in 2022-23. Some highlights of kind of what we learned throughout that committee process were that we established some priorities. A lot of it was around a single campus vision in the future, and then the work relied around how do we get there? Do we get there in one phase? Do we get there in 2 phases? What can that look like? We spent a lot of time looking at existing building assessments and needs, and then we developed several options, which have been reviewed in different capacities since 2022. And then we've had ongoing input. We've been out here updating numbers as time has gone by, buildings have aged, things have been replaced, costs have changed. We've just been refreshing kind of where we are with our work. So that's where we've been. This is a site, the graphic here is a site plan that's got quite a bit of dust on it now. It's from March 2023. But it kind of gives you a sense of where we kind of landed with the committee process. And so the scope, as it has been finalized, that we're going to talk through the budget for today, is a new middle and high school building with an auditorium. So that would essentially be a middle school and a high school kind of under one roof, if you want to think of it as that kind of a concept. New field house. We would, as part of this plan, abate and demolish Westwood, abate and demolish Lindsay, and abate and demolish the existing high school. So this is one path to that single campus vision that was landed on. You can see that the proposal is that the new building would sit kind of where the existing practice fields sit. And then at this point in time, we were kind of still looking at the location of the field house. I think as we've continued that conversation, and we'll be continuing that conversation, we'll kind of look at where it makes the most sense for that to land. And then the existing middle school would be repurposed for pre-K through 5th grade. So we can talk about that a little bit, about what that scope looks like.
Abby, I'm sorry, just
yeah.
for sake of clarification.
Yeah.
When you say a middle school and a high school under one roof,
Mm-hmm.
they would be separate components. Yes, they'd share the same building, but they would be segregated from each other for nearly all purposes. There'd be some common
Correct.
areas.
Correct.
But the middle school would stay a middle school with its own administrator, its own students. High school would stay a high school with its own administrator and its own students.
Yeah, that's
Right.
absolutely correct.
Okay,
We
thank
would
you.
we would have separate entries, separate administrative areas, and in fact, that's a lot of the work that we've done. It's actually a nice segue. A lot of the work that we've done since landing at this plan option is to go through what we call the POR, which is the Program of Requirements. It's the cover sheet of which is that sheet on the right. And I don't expect you to necessarily be able to read that. It's just more of a graphic to show what we've been doing since we kind of landed at that plan recommendation last March. And there was a bit of a break, and then we kind of dove into, all right, if we want this to function as Dr. Markwart explained, we wanted to go through every space in the building and make sure we had enough spaces in the building that it could function as 2 separate schools within a school, if you want to think of it that way. So it's been, in order to do that, we've met with the different building leaders, and we've talked with folks that have to do with curriculum and scheduling. We've looked at what is necessary for both of those programs to function, and we've made sure that we have the right amount of square footage shown in the plan to accommodate that. We also have been adjusting the scope of the existing middle school, so this building's renovation. So as part of this proposal, this would become the new pre-K through 5th building. And the district is already undertaking some renovations to the building, so we had to back out those components from our scope, since that's already going to be taken care of with existing district funds. And then something we talked about a lot was what was necessary for a field house, and it was talked about conceptually. A field house can mean a lot of different things. It can be a lot of different sizes. And so there was a tour recently, some photos just from the newer field house in Stowe Monroe Falls. And there's a lot of examples of field houses around us, but we were trying to get a sense of what is about the scale and the size and the type of field house we're talking about here. So there's some features in that building, such as like a community walking track. You can see there's some different multi-purpose courts. They have some locker room facilities and things of that nature. So we didn't nail down necessarily all of those details, but what we were able to arrive at was about the size and type of field house we're looking at, so that we could put a budget together for it. So that's been done, and then right now what's underway, now that we kind of know the scope of this project, is we have a team working to update that site plan that you saw at the beginning to reflect what we know now, and then we'll be, should you choose to move forward and put this on the ballot, we would move forward with some visualization so that folks could kind of get a sense of what could this look like on the site. So that's where we are kind of in the process at the moment. I'll stop here for a second before I get to the budget to review it, to just ask if you had any questions thus far on the scope. Okay. All right, so here is our budget summary. So this feeds into a larger budget document where each of these numbers kind of gets broken down into more detail, but this gives you a high level idea of all the scope that we've been talking about and that where we've arrived over the last few years, and what the budgets are looking like for that. So the way it works is it starts at the top with the new middle and high school. So new middle school, high school, that includes an auditorium within the cost, and that line item is around $90 million. And then the rest of the items in white below that are things that need to happen either on the campus or with the existing buildings once that new building comes online. So the wastewater treatment plant that's on site has some needed upgrades. There's the abatement and demolition of the high school, of Westwood, and of Lindsay. The item in green is the cost to renovate the existing middle school. So that $11 million, $11.6 million does not include the scope that's already being completed by the district. So that's additional scope to bring this building up to, the standards of what you would, want for a renovated pre-K through fifth. There's a line item to add about a 10,000 square foot addition. This building is sized such that it could really handle the first through the fifth grade really nicely. But when you add in that early childhood of the pre-K and K, it's a little short on space. So we would be proposing an addition as well to make this a pre-K through 5 facility. The field house, as indicated, assumes around a 25,000 square foot facility. And that is in blue. That's a $7 million item. And then the board office is nothing. We just wanted to acknowledge that it would remain here in this space in the middle school. We wouldn't be proposing that this would get renovated into academic space. This would stay as the board office. So you can see we have a subtotal of just under $117 million for that scope above. And then what kind of starts happening below that line is a contingency that we just like to include in there for, unexpected items, asks, things that might shift or change that might come up. And then the final inflation factor of 6.5% is us thinking about what will happen to costs from now until a year after you would pass your bond issue. It takes about a year typically to go through the design process, and then at the point we bid the project, that's the point you're paying, essentially the cost for the building. So that's just to project into the future to when we would think that everything would bid. So everything right now that's included on the scope above is at $128.2 million for that scope. Any questions about the scope and the budget as it stands tonight?
Is that $7 million field house cost, is that, what type of field house are we looking at this point? Because I know that years have gone by since we started this the very first time, and then when we restarted it post-COVID, but that cost went up a bit.
Yeah.
What kind of, is it a shell? Is it?
It's not. So at one point, when we started talking about field house in the committee work, we were talking about what a big range a field house could cost. And so we talked about different examples. You could have a facility that is truly more of a field house that has literal turf in it. You could have a courts building. You could include community walking track or community space that would make that field house bigger. So at one point we talked about between a 15,000 and a 25,000 square foot facility. So there was a range of costs there just because of the size. We didn't know how many courts or how big or what we were putting in the field house. And then at one point we had talked about, well, could there be an option where we would just look at, through the bond issue, putting up essentially the shell of the field house, and then other potential fundraising efforts or things could finish that out. So that's what, at one point, I think it was between $4 and $5 million as we were plugging in placeholders. That's why we got to a certain point in the process where we said that we really think it's critical that we at least go look at a facility and look at the size of it, determine, do we feel like this is what we're talking about in order to do what we need to do with our athletics and even with the school programs, because right now at the high school, you're used to your main gym and that community gym. So we were kind of keeping that in mind. So the cost is really a result of finally nailing down, this is gonna be a 25,000 square foot facility, and it will be finished, and that it will have flooring and equipment and things within it.
Is there 1 or 2 gyms then in the 6, 8, 9, 12 combined building?
2 gymnasiums as part of
So
that.
we would have 2 gymnasiums and the field house
Correct.
space for, okay.
Correct, yep. Okay. So, moving forward from there, this is a pretty simple, timeline, but just kind of wanted to talk through, should you want to move forward with a May of 2025 campaign and election, these would essentially be the next steps. Next month in December, we would want to discuss the bond millage and useful life of the scope that we just talked through. That's not something that really falls under our scope, and I don't know if, Karen, you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I think what we're looking at tonight is to agree upon what the scope of the project's going to be. And then I would like to have a special meeting that we would have, that would, the board could have maybe December, first part of December, to talk about the millage, the total cost, because once we decide the scope, there are other additional legal fees, bond underwriting fees, things like that, that would have to be included in the project, and then have you look at that on perhaps December 1st as a special meeting, and then on the 16th, we would have a meeting, a regular meeting in which you would vote on a bond. That's kind of the game plan, if we could do that.
So that second December bubble would really be that second meeting, which would be essentially the first resolution stating that this is kind of what we intend to do and put on the ballot. Then in January, there would be a second resolution that would be necessary as part of that process, and at that time, you would file with the Board of Elections. And then from there, it would really be campaign mode until the election in May. So, we're coming up against, December, which is really when you'd want to finalize those decisions to result in a May campaign and election.
So really, we're not voting on scope tonight. There's no resolution on scope tonight. It's just, once we see the bond millage useful life, then the discussion is.
Right, so on the
what is
next,
the scope?
I'd like on the December meeting, finalize that scope, finalize the millage, and then you're looking at a vote then in December, later in December on the 16th. So we can resolve that. So any questions you have for Abby on scope tonight, and then you can certainly have additional questions of us on hopefully December 1st if it meets the guidelines or your calendars.
But to determine the bond millage, you need to know what kind of number to calculate the bond millage on.
Useful
I
life.
do,
Yeah, so that's what we need to sort of agree on tonight.
right.
That-
And then I've sent over to the attorneys and construction attorneys that we have this detail that Abby sent us, plus the detail she has behind there, over to our attorneys so that they can determine the useful life, because that's going to determine how long the bonds will be. We're hoping for a 37-year life on the bonds. It looks
Yep.
very good.
Yep.
I know Abby's already sent that over. And then we'll have some additional discussions with the attorneys regarding total project cost, if there are additional fees that we're looking at, and then have a final number for you at the next meeting. But we need to know if this is the scope of the project.
If that is the scope of the project?
If
Yeah.
this is the scope.
Yep.
That would be what we need to leave here today with.
Okay.
So do we need a motion then to approve this scope?
You don't have to have a motion, but you should give us some direction. You should give us a direction that this is,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, to calculate
yeah.
what the cost would be.
Okay, so then,
We're not committing to anything now,
No.
but she needs to have this,
Okay.
the scope so that she can.
If there's, right, if
Okay.
it's the full project, then we'll run with those numbers. If it's something different, then we need to know that tonight.
okay. Dr. Beers, what's your opinion?
I think that we could, I'm willing to make a motion that we direct the treasurer to prepare millage estimates based on the project budget that's been presented to us tonight. And I think we would have an opportunity then when you come back with those millage numbers, for us to look at those and go, well, that's not what we were really expecting, and we need to change the scope.
That's what I was thinking too.
Okay.
I think we need to have those numbers before we can really.
But she's gotta have a number to base the
Yeah, I
millage
agree,
on,
and I
so-
agree, we should use this to base it on, because we know this would be
Yeah.
everything.
Okay.
Okay, so
I'm
Mrs.
agree.
Claypool, Dr. Beers, you're both okay?
Yeah.
I'm okay with this. Mrs. Coleman Walsh? You good? Yep. All right.
All
Mrs.
right.
Leavenworth is good too. We're gonna go with the scope.
Okay, we're going to prepare our millage and cost associated with that. So we'll be working with the attorneys, and Abby, I know we'll reach out with you with the attorneys and have one final meeting with all of us before we have come back to you. And I would propose I believe, December 1st meeting date. So if you can look at your calendars and send them back to me, or we can look at those now. You can give it to me later.
What day of the week
I
is
might
that?
forget
I'm hoping
later.
it's Monday.
Yeah, we just look now.
Is it Sunday? Then Tuesday. Then the second, I don't care.
Yeah, December 2nd.
All right, December
Would be a
2nd.
Monday, which is fine with me.
I can do December 2nd.
Me too.
I'm okay with the second.
Okay? Kathy?
I think so, but I can't, I don't have my full calendar.
Okay,
I'm gonna pencil it in.
okay. All right. All right, we'll
It's
look
retired
for
people.
a time and look for the second. If that doesn't work out, then we'll find an alternate date where all 5 of you can be there, but we will work for that week. That'll give you a 2-week period before you have to make a final vote, and then remember from that past list of dates that we had, we have to send consent to the state and then do our first vote, and then you'll have a second vote after we get the numbers back from the county to do a final vote before you go on the ballot. So it's kind of a 2-vote process.
What is the drop-dead date for submitting to the county for that board resolution number 1? Should've-
Early January.
For resolution number 1?
Oh, for number 1, no, the 16th. We'll have
16th.
to,
That's
I
our
don't
board
have it.
meeting.
I don't have that exact date.
Okay,
But
but there's
the
not a lot of...
16th is tight. It's,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. There's not a lot of room there to move that date around.
no, we're at the end.
Yeah, okay.
We need to make that 16th date
Yeah.
because we have to send the consents down, get it back in order to get the last vote in. I should have brought that.
Anything else that I can help with until then?
I don't think
Okay.
so.
And on our side, I know we've talked about big numbers and we've talked about, attorneys and millage and all that stuff. But as part of that process, depending on where we land in December, like I said, we are moving into what can be a very exciting time, which is thinking about what this could look like and working on some visualization to help not only you, but folks out in the community understand what this might look like. And, there's lots of opportunities to get folks involved in that process, which can be very, very cool and very fun. So that's what we'll switch into actual architecture mode for a minute, which will be exciting. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Abby, I'll extend the same offer to you. You can stay if you wish.
Thank you. I may or may not have brought my bag right over here with me, but have a good night.
Thank you.
Are we ready for you? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I'm gonna need my glasses for that.
Can you hear me, Scott? If I speak really loud? you, Scott. All right, the numbers are small, but they're mighty. So we're going to talk from this. Usually we do a presentation, and we've had a lot of discussion of big numbers. So the good news is we've got a couple of things on the 5-year forecast. Again, the board, this is your responsibility to prepare a 5-year forecast and every November, and then we update it again in May. So this is fulfilling your obligation to the state of Ohio. So if we look at the 5-year forecast, a couple of things have changed since we were last looking at that. It's in May. We have the tax year 2023 revaluation has been, our first collections have come through. And we have, it's part of that 6-year revaluation process that everybody went through. And we saw a 32% increase in our property values. Now, that doesn't mean you had a 32% increase in your property taxes, but it means your value of your property went up 32%. The board voted to suspend $1 million of that $3.7 million emergency levy that we had in place. So that's something that the board did, that you're seeing in your tax bills is a $1 million reduction. And that was, part of that's in 2024, and part of that is in 2025. So we've already seen part of that come through in 2024, and we're seeing the rest of it come through here. The County Budget Commission, we suspended another $2.3 million in taxes. That is coming through in the 2025 and the 2026 school year, and that's only going to be for 1 year. So the $1 million suspension will be completed in 25. The 2.35 will be completed in 2026. So that's a 1-year suspension, and then those levies go back on the tax bills. If we look at our, and so that's kind of why you're seeing this 23 million goes up to 24, goes to 25, kind of goes up a little bit. It doesn't go up as much. So we're seeing that. And then down below, you're seeing the state funding as well. We did see a $263,000 increase in our state funding. That's what we're anticipating this year as House Bill 33 comes into effect. And then we're keeping that pretty steady going along because we don't know. There's 2 more years of the school funding, the fair school funding, and we don't know what's going to happen in the biennium budget. So we're going to keep that flat going forward in our forecast. If we look at the state share, this is what the state pays of your local property taxes for homestead and rollback. So there's about a 15%, 12.5% payment that the state makes on your behalf. We're keeping that. That goes up as the regular taxes go up as well. And then the other is really kind of an interest and other revenue that we have associated with the district that's also local. So if you were to look at our total of our 37 million, 38, 39, when you look at this, about 76% of these are local taxes, local support, and 24 is coming from the state. 24% is coming from the state. So the residents bear the cost of our district. When we look at the outer years, you'll see this drop, 26 to 24 million. That's because we have an emergency levy that needs to be renewed. So the $3.7 million emergency levy needs to come in and be renewed by 2028. So we'll be back on the budget, back on the ballot for a renewal, which is not an increase in taxes because emergency levies are fixed fee. You don't get an increase when you pass those. Those are just continue at the same amount that they were passed. And those have been renewed 10 years, 15 years ago, those were put in place. So we've had those for quite some time.
Karen, just to make one thing clear, to sort of highlight what you said, the $1 million suspension in tax collections that this board volunteered to do was pretty much a distinction. I believe this is the only Board of Education in the state that voluntarily suspended $1 million worth of collections for its residents. Is that correct?
That's correct. So, and if we have the revaluation, there's certain counties that were revaluated. So we had the Geauga County was last year, Geauga County will be this year, Lake County will be this year as well. So they'll see the similar property increases, property tax increases as well.
Can you also explain again the reason it's called an emergency and that it's really not an emergency, but it's?
It is a legal term they use for emergency, that it is a fixed amount levy. So meaning that you have, you will collect the same exact amount of money every year. We'll always collect $3.7 million. Doesn't matter if our property values go up or the property values go down, you'll collect the same amount of money. So it's not really an emergency in that we are physically an emergency. It's just the type of levy. It's a fixed amount of time, and the most you could have is a 10-year emergency levy, and it's a fixed amount of dollars. So that's kind of our difference between a continuing operating levy that fluctuates with valuation. So as the valuation of a house valuation goes up, the millage would go down. And that's kind of that House Bill 920 that everybody's been talking about. So I know y'all have had a lot of discussion and a lot of information based on that as the valuations went up this year.
And how long has it been since we increased any millage at all?
In the 90s. So before we had those last emergency levies have been in place for over 20 years.
So we
So,
haven't added any new millage?
no, we've not. No, we had the Newberry transfer, which did add additional revenue to our district, and then this revaluation. And what happened on that revaluation was the state requires schools to be funded at a 20 mil levy, a 20 mil level. And with the revaluation, when the prices went up, that millage went down, and so it went below the 20 mil floor, and that's a ceiling. So that's by law, the district residents must fund their schools at a 20 mil floor. So that dropped down to 15, almost 15 mils. So that's why you saw an increase in your property taxes.
I think maybe another important thing is to point out that this levy that we're looking at for renewing, which I reluctantly call an emergency levy, but one of the other features about that, if I'm correct, is that if it is renewed, then the state's contribution to us remains the same,
And intact, yeah.
intact.
So
And if, on the other hand, it is defeated and we have to get a new levy, then the state's contribution drops dramatically.
Right, so several years ago, the state passed a law that said, you know, any new levies going on the ballot, you'll pay 100% of it as resident, before you got to take the homestead rollback. So we're gonna see that, like you said, if we renew them, and we keep renewing them, we keep that in place. If we have new money, it's no longer there.
That was that 12.5%?
So it's, the state pays that for you. Now, there's property tax, you know, the House has been looking at that along with the Senate to come up with a tax kind of revamping of the tax. One of the things that they're looking at, because obviously that was a large increase for us, is to give credits back to certain individuals if your 5% of if your property tax went up 5% of your income. So they're looking to give you a tax credit back. That's one of the things they're discussing now. They're also looking at the 20 mil floor, but that's kind of how they're kind of looking at that in addition to that. Because that is a state law, and it's in the Constitution, that you have to fund schools at the 20 mil floor. So that's harder to change. Okay. All right. Scott, will you go up to the expenses, please? All right, thank you. So the biggest expenses that we have are salaries and benefits. We were able to settle our OPSI and our WGA union contracts. We have a 3-year contract through 2027 at a 3.2% increase in salaries, 3.3 and a 3.5 for the next 3 years. So you see that increase go on there. We also have some additional employees that we hired, 1 or 2 in coming into the 2025 school year. And then we'll see those steady as we go along and see normal increases there. In the insurance premiums, that's one of our largest in the employee benefits. You see retirement and like your FICA, which you normally see in FICA, we have SCRS and STRS. But we also see this is where our insurance is. As you know, that our insurance this year, we had a 0% increase. Average is 8% is around the nation, so we had a very good year. But we did see a slight increase due to some additional people coming on to our insurance. So going forward, we have a 6% next year in 2026, and then 10% following that, trending there. Purchase services, we do see an increase in purchase services, about 12%. Part of that is on the transportation contracts that we have. Some of that is in some additional outside tuition that we have for students as well. And then we're seeing that level off at about a 5 to 6% increase. We're hoping that we can continue that. And then salaries, supplies and materials, we see an increase there. Part of that is our $250,000 investment in the science of reading. And that was purchased this year. The board did approve that curriculum this year. We're going to have some additional curriculum, probably about $30,000 this year to finish that out. And then we have a normal textbook cycle, and that'll include the, what is it, the math curriculum will be next, and then we have some additional ones going on. So we kind of rotate them. You have language arts, we have math, we have social studies, we have other things that are involved. So we kind of follow that, and Dr. Benkasa's in charge of that. So we're looking at that. And then capital expenditures, those are based on what we have as need, and we're seeing about a $400,000 increase. That's where we pay for computers, and we pay for buses if we need additional buses. We have some buses, we pay for a different fund, but that's some things that we're looking there here. We did get our final bids in for buses. They're going to be about $127,000 this year for the buses. In addition to that, other objects, these are our fees that we pay, basically the county. So as the taxes go up, we pay additional fees to the county for them to collect those taxes. When we look at here, kind of some exciting things that we've done for the middle school and the renovations that Abby was talking about. We transferred $6.5 million to a middle school capital fund, and that's to pay for windows. We have all new windows in the middle school, new doors. We're going to talk about a couple of things tonight that we're doing. Skylights, roofs, those things are getting done at this middle school campus because we anticipate that this will be the kindergarten, fifth grade, and we want to have this building up to speed. So that transfer was made, $6.5 million. We're going to see if we can transfer at the end of this year, $2.5 million to add to those renovations, and then continue that until we have those things taken care of.
But those things were done, they would have been done whether we had a new facility plan or not.
Correct. Those are ones
were
we identified.
necessary, yeah.
We identified over $18 million worth of expenditures in this building that were critical. And so we're looking at those as we take some of those things off the list so that we don't have to do them in additional taxes, because we were able to have those additional funds this year. All right, we're going to operate at a slight deficit this year. We're looking to see what we do there, and then that will continue to kind of even out. And then we have, here you see these larger numbers. That's because if you scroll up, Scott, you'll see those emergency levies. Well, we have the need for those emergency levies. Ooh. And they just come back in. Well, we won't look at that. But those things come back in. That's why you have those larger numbers, because that number's below expenditures. And that's how we have to report it to the state. So one of the things that we're looking at tonight on the board policies is our cash balances and a policy we have on cash balances. So we want to have an adequate cash balance to continue operations. And so we're looking at about 120 days cash, so that we have 4 months worth of activity that we can continue if we didn't have any more cash coming in the door. And so we will meet those needs through the end of 2029. We'll see those will end up a little higher than that, but we want to keep that in mind, keep that in a good position, a strong financial position for us going forward. So all said and done, we don't see any operating levies. I don't see any operating levies coming in the next until 2029, past that. And that will give you, and we do have to renew that emergency levy, the $3.7 million emergency levy. But again, we'll keep that whole, that state funding of that 12.5%. So that's very positive for us. Questions? Okay.
So the way this is presented, it shows us not renewing those levies. You have to do it that way.
It shows it below. Scott, can
Oh,
you
so,
can you see
okay.
it? I can't make it go.
So it was below the deficit, it showed.
Right.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Yep.
More.
It comes through, well, you can't see it.
That's all right. So
It
it's-
comes down. It comes down as the other one.
Okay.
Oh, it's one more. It's on the next page.
But what we see here is without.
Right.
That's why we have those huge deficits. Okay.
And what we see going forward, yeah, you'll see it come through. So you get half of it in 1 year, and you get the full amount in the second year. And that's because our physical year is different than the cash collections. So, okay. All right. Thank you, Karen.
Next was to be the recognition of the National Merit Scholarship students, but we decided to allow them to leave early. So I did ask Mr. Brandon Stewart tonight to just give us a little bit of a recap on the fall athletics program.
Battery change. No, it's still good. Oh yeah, you got 2 bars. How fast? I try. All right. So now that the fall season is wrapped up and we're already underway in the winter season, games actually start this weekend for the winter season. Just wanted to take a look back at some of the accomplishments from the fall season that our student athletes had over the course of this past fall, which they probably started, most of them working last May, all throughout September, October, November. So first and foremost, we had 231 student athletes that participated in fall sports this year, which was right about on pace with where we were last year and a little bit up from 2 years ago. Out of those 231 athletes, they combined, most importantly, before any win, loss, recognition, or anything like that, they combined for a 3.4 GPA as student athletes, which was awesome for them. The time, those of you that have kids that played sports or play sports now, the time that goes into it, the practice times, the late nights, the long trips, bus rides, and stuff like that, to still be able to put together that effort in the classroom is really a testament to them as people and as like I said, as student athletes first. So that was something that we really were proud of, and we hope to see not only stay there, but continue to improve as well. As far as recognition goes this year, CVC first teamers, we had 10 different CVC first team selections. Boys soccer had 2, volleyball had 1, girls soccer had 3, cross country had 1, golf had 1, football had 2. Second team recognitions for the CVC, we had 2 from boys soccer, 3 from girls soccer, 2 from volleyball, 1 from boys cross country, 1 from boys golf, 2 from football, and 1 from girls cross country. So in total, we had 22 kids recognized by the CVC, which gets recognized and voted on by the other coaches in the league. So that's really cool to see their accomplishments being recognized by other coaches throughout the league as well. All district, so far of what's come out, they just had a banquet yesterday, girls and boys soccer, Greater Cleveland Soccer Coaches Association. There were over 900 kids at the banquet that took place yesterday, all throughout Greater Cleveland. We had 3 first teamers from the girls soccer team represented there, and they had 3 second teamers as well. Boys soccer had 4 first teamers and 3 second teamers that all got to go to the banquet yesterday and get recognized. Back to the CVC, we had our girls soccer team that won the CVC championship this year. It was their second straight CVC championship back to back. They were undefeated. They had 1 tie with Chagrin in what was a really good game that we played here. The numbers in the girls soccer program are continuing to skyrocket. There are 37, 38 kids this year. So that program continues to grow, and they seemed poised for a pretty good run here in the CVC. Our boys soccer numbers continue to go up as well. And really just our numbers in general headed into the winter are also up overall. So far we've had, actually just today, we finished up this afternoon after school, we had 2 college commits. We had 2 volleyball players, and 1 also plays softball, Ireland Oswick and Shaylin Rogoski, who are signed to go to the College of Worcester next year. So Ireland will be playing volleyball there, and Shay will be doing volleyball and softball at the College of Worcester. So we did their signing and photos and everything earlier today. And also, one of the things that we started to do, when we got here was we really wanted to listen to what the kids had to say about their experience overall in athletics while they were here. So last spring, we started asking kids, talking to them, having conversations, but also gave them an opportunity to express how their seasons went after the season. And it was completely anonymous, and it was optional, 100% optional. I didn't even know who did it or who didn't do it. But it was a way just for them to provide feedback for me to know how things were going. Also to know, how practices were going, but not just the bad stuff. We also wanted to know the good stuff. We wanted to know how well their coaches were doing, what their experience was like. And overwhelmingly, the numbers were in, last spring and even into this fall, the experience that they're having overall and their athletic experience and their school experience as well have just been extremely positive. And just giving them an outlet to be able to share that, so it's not, and also recognizing the good, because I think sometimes that gets overlooked in these kind of situations too. So the kids have been great with that. They had an outstanding fall. Most of our fall kids are playing in a winter sport. I think we right now have around 200 or so kids in winter sports right now. So multiple sport athletes across the board. So they really don't get a break. They will go right into their winter seasons right after, some of them while their fall seasons ended. And the last thing that I did forget to mention, and it's probably one of the bigger accomplishments, we did have 2 state qualifiers this year. We had a boys cross-country runner, Jacob Williams, who went down to Columbus. He finished 73rd overall in the state cross-country championships. And then we had a golfer, Dylan Phillips, a freshman, who went down to Firestone in Akron. And he shot really well at Firestone, played really well. And again, he's only a freshman. He has a sister who I think is in 7th grade, who is also a really good golfer, so we have that to look forward to. But a freshman and a junior who have already made their way down to state and represented us really well while they were down there, so.
Thank you.
All right.
Don't go anywhere yet. We just received word just a few days ago that West Geauga Local School District and our Director of Athletics, Brandon Stewart, are recipients of the Ohio Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association's Bruce Brown Award of Excellence. This is the highest award I believe that organization extends to anyone. It is really done to recognize school districts that exemplify what they would call education-based athletics. So I'm going to read you just a real short quote from the organization. It says, "The objective of the award is to recognize Ohio interscholastic athletic departments who are purposefully educating and supporting the mission of education-based athletics in Ohio and not defining success based solely upon wins and losses. The award is designed to honor and celebrate those school athletic departments that are attempting to shift the sport culture toward the genuine purpose of why sports are a part of our school and community culture in America." And Brandon, I want to commend you because I know you received special recognition. The school has a nice banner that's in the gym, but Brandon has a snazzy plaque.
I do.
And some
Still in the bag.
recognition that was extended to him too. So I wanted to congratulate you on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
We hit all of the reports and presentations, yep?
we're done.
Okay. Okay, so we're gonna be moving on to public remarks. As a reminder, we do limit to 3 minutes per. Mrs. Pavlik, will you set the timer? And then we will get started. So, Joe, I cannot pronounce your last name. I did this last time too, didn't I? Sorry.
My name is Joe Konechny. Before I begin, I just have a point of order question. I understand Coach Rosati is wanting to make some comments. Is he going to be restricted to 3 minutes? Is it permissible for me to give my 3 minutes to Coach, or nope? Okay, sorry, Coach. I've been around for many years in this school. I mentioned that last time, and one of the thoughts I had since last time, about 100 years ago, I was on the West Geauga Education Foundation with Kathy, among other people, and one of the things Kathy taught me, or opened my eyes to, because I don't know if you were on the school board then, or the state board, or whatever, but prior to our meetings, we'd be chatting, and somebody would make a comment about the school, or this or that, or some school policy, and of course, it was typically a negative comment. And Kathy would kind of make some comments, not talking out of school, not saying anything confidential or anything, but, you know, the gist of it was, you probably don't know all of what's going on before you make these stupid comments. Now, I only made a few of the stupid comments, so she didn't say stupid, I said stupid. But it taught me that in these situations, there's a lot going on that we don't know about, and we need to trust the people that make decisions to make them in an honest and timely way. And that was one of the things that Kathy kind of impressed upon me. And I mentioned last time, I was one of those guys that sat in the stand for years and talked about, what in the world is that coach thinking? He called a play that was just stupid beyond belief. And then, as I said, Coach would, Monday nights, we'd meet in his classroom. He'd go over the game films. And that stupid play he called, he didn't call that play, the team ran the wrong play. or some kid blocked in the wrong direction, or some 16-year-old made a bad decision on reading a defense. So it wasn't a boneheaded coach making a stupid call. It was a bunch of other things that went into it. And if the play had run as been, as it's supposed to run, probably better things would have happened. But again, it taught me to shut my mouth about being critical about things. I understand the coach has been reinstated. I'm very grateful for whoever made that decision. My wish, though, is that I hope that what comes out of this is that the people that started this process would have done so in a thoughtful way. I don't know all that went into it or all that went behind it, obviously, so I can't comment on that. But I do know that I've heard that many children, many kids and students were impacted significantly by what happened or didn't happen in the classroom. Certainly, the reputation of a man whose integrity, whose honesty, whose care for kids has been beyond reproach was dragged through the mud. So if ever anything like this comes up again in the future, I would trust that the people responsible for making those decisions would certainly do so with a mind that is open and that is fair. Because, I gotta believe there was probably a different way of handling this that would not have resulted in the kinds of things that happened. And again, I'm just grateful that Coach has been reinstated. We talk every now and then. I don't know what his plans are. But for those of you that made that decision, I just pray and hope that thought went into it. And if ever I want to find out about that, I may call and ask one of you guys, rather than talk about what boneheads you guys are, or whoever made the decision. But I think, again, I think it's important that we stop and take note and look behind the scenes rather than shoot off at the mouth. And one last thing that just kind of, it symbolized what this whole thing meant. Years ago, our daughter played soccer here, and Mo Brown was the coach. And he was talking one time, commiserating, said, the ideal coaching job is at an orphanage. He said, but those spots are all full.
Thank you. Jerry Flesher.
Fortunately, I grew up out here and was able to go to West Geauga, and I come up here, and part of the thing was for Coach Rosati and a couple other things, and I'll probably have to come back to speak on some of the others because of the time limit. One of the things, I've been trying to get on the school board meeting, but it's impossible to call the board office here because nobody answers the phone ever, and that's sort of disappointing. It took me today, I had to actually ask the lady from the middle school to walk over here to ask him to answer the phone. And I don't think that's right. Second of all, the thing with Coach Rosati, I get to listen to a lot of people in the community, and I'm all for what you've all talked about tonight for the school going forward, the new buildings, this and that. But when we do stuff like this, it really hurts the school that people think the other way. And I think if that was handled in the right way, where when he was accused of something, it was a non-sexual thing, that I would say you take time out right then and there. But what he was accused of, I think time could have went on, and we could have done our research and handled it the right way without dragging the man through the mud, being on the news, all this and that. And I would like to know what it costs the school board in lawyer fees already. So, it was totally mishandled. And I have a daughter that is is a superintendent. And like she said, they're not gonna answer you, and I get it. She said, actually, the school board's probably not responsible, but I think you are. Ultimately, you guys run the ship. So you're responsible for the people that work for you and that. And then the other thing I wanted to touch base on, I understand the superintendent is retiring, and I found it a little disheartening that we just placed somebody else in the position, in within, and I don't know the person who's been placed in, I have no judgment on her. But I also think it's your job to do a search. There's other candidates that could be better. And that's part of running the board. That is your job. So, again, I'm not here to beat on you guys. I commend you. There's a lot of great at West Geauga. And, you know, I'd like to see some more sports stuff. I think the young kids don't get to use the facilities, and I'd like to see them more available to them. That there are kids of our future, but, you know, it's all stuff that understand takes time. And you know, I'd be willing to come back and talk about it, but I know my 3 minutes is up, and I appreciate your time.
Just to give you a response of some sort, we'll look into the question that you asked specifically, and we'll have an answer at our next public board meeting for the question, the direct question that you asked about cost. So we'll have something like that for you available then. Obviously, we don't have any of that information at this point. And our numbers are posted on the website. I would welcome anybody to call us directly and ask questions. It doesn't take a board meeting to have a conversation. We're all open to that, so thank you. Jackie Grulich.
My name is Jackie Grulich. I reside on Kenyon Drive in Chesterland. I am a mother of 3 students in the district. Like so many that have stood here before me, I abhor public speaking, so I prepared a statement. The Board of Education should be an independent branch of the school district they were elected to represent. Oversight is an essential part of that. Failure to remain independent undermines the ability of the board to function in its sworn oath to serve the students, the staff, and those residing in the school district. According to the Ohio School Boards Association, Understanding Your School Board, its members, one of the largest group of elected officials in the state, are charged with one of the major responsibilities in government, to provide the best educational opportunities possible for the youth of Ohio. It goes on to say, a school board sets educational goals and establishes policy for the school system based upon state laws and community values. Perhaps the most important responsibility of a school board is to employ a superintendent and treasurer and hold them responsible for managing the school in accordance with the school board's policies. With the items that are on the agenda this evening, specifically the revisions of board policy of job descriptions and the employment of superintendent, allow me to read Article 1230 under Section 1000, Administration. Superintendent of Schools. The superintendent of schools shall strive to achieve district goals for students by providing educational direction and supervision to the professional staff and supervision to the non-teaching staff, and by acting as a proper model for staff and students both in the school and outside the district. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, under L, it says strive towards the highest standards of personal conduct work relationships. While we're here, let me also briefly read parts of Article 1240, the evaluation of superintendent. The Board of Education believes it is essential that it evaluates a superintendent's performance periodically in order to assist both the board and the superintendent in the proper discharge of the responsibilities and to enable the board to provide the district with the best possible leadership. In closing, I was relieved to hear that Coach Rosati was returned to his positions in this district. I am, however, concerned with a very troubling pattern I see and have experienced myself. It is the board's position that the matter is closed, although I was never questioned or permitted to offer any evidence prior to their decision. My concern is that unless or until this board operates as an independent branch of this district, one with oversight in mind, those that might stand to benefit from the investigations of qualified and well-respected school personnel can do so with impunity. Thank you for your time.
Matt Rosati.
Thank you. First off, let me say, by no means would I ever come up to attack the board in any way, shape, or form. I truly do appreciate everything that you do for our district. I would really like to take the time just to give you a timeline from my viewpoint of what has happened to me. And I say that the last time that I actually came to a school board meeting, I shouldn't say that. My very first school board meeting that I attended was in 1991, and I think there were a lot of these people that were here when the students walked out. There are students in here that walked out, and because they were in protest over a decision about being riffed. I was riffed along with some other teachers, but unfortunately, the students all walked out and they demanded that I be brought back. And there would be a school board meeting, and I was asked to attend the school board meeting, and because of them, I was able to come back. So it's interesting to come back to another school board meeting that is highly populated, and I thank all those who have come out to support me. But here is the timeline from my viewpoint. On September 27th, we played Hawken, and someone in the stands, it has been reported by numerous sources, stated, I got something that will get Rosati fired, and the board owes me. And that statement was issued to the principal along with other witnesses, and then my lawyer would get a hold of that statement as well. Also that night, Mr. Stewart, the athletic director, was outside of the locker room after we lost, and two statements coming from students said, he's got to go. On Wednesday, October 2nd, a report that serious accusations against Matt Rosati in the football program were made. Then on Thursday, October 3rd, there was no school. Friday, there was no school. Saturday, Sunday, and then on Monday at 11:46 a.m., Mr. Patty emailed me as there was buzz going around the school about some type of conversation and kids were meeting. This is the email that I received. A serious matter was recently brought to our attention regarding your football program. Last Wednesday, Brandon and I received an allegation of inappropriate conduct against you. The allegation reported is of a non-sexual nature. As courtesy, we want to make you aware and let you know that we'll be reaching out to you soon to talk with you about these allegations. Then, later that afternoon, that was at 11:46, at 2:15, Mr. Patty hand-delivered me a letter and tells me to go home and not return until instructed to do so. No teaching or coaching. I asked about my classes, and I was told that he would handle everything. I would go home, and 3 days later, on Thursday, October 10th, I am made aware of numerous news outlets reporting about a situation, including from the Geauga Maple Leaf, where I read, just like everyone else, because I had never been informed of anything. I told Mr. Patty that I've done absolutely nothing wrong. But on Thursday, I read in the paper, quote, unquote, according to several sources familiar with the matter, the inappropriate conduct allegedly involves Wolverine players stealing a football from a football camp. Geauga prosecutor Jim Flantz and Chester Township Police Chief Craig Young said the alleged conduct is not criminal in nature and no criminal investigation is underway. That day, I also read...
1 minute, Mr. Rosati.
Yes.
1 minute.
Thank you. That night, I am contacted by numerous sources, and I contact my lawyer, and anyway, the point of my conversation is this, as I have questions. I've spent 36 days out, 25 of them instructional days, where my students all had study hall, and they all received an A for the quarter. I just want you to know, as a school board, I just want you to know. I am not blaming anyone. I just want you, because as many people have reported to me, that you were informed, that they wrote you letters in your response, very cordial, that you didn't know. I want you to know. The bottom line, and I have much more to say, but as my time is running out, let me say this. I speak out because if an allegation by an unhappy parent or player can take a teacher or coach out of the classroom field, what does that say about our society? If it happened to me, 36 years as an educator with a spotless record, if it happens to me, how many times has it happened to other coaches at West Geauga? Coaches released in football, basketball, baseball, lacrosse, boys and girls soccer, wrestling, tennis, volleyball, cheerleading, all since I've been here. So in conclusion, I want to thank all of those who've come out to support me. It is humbling. I can't put into words. It's the ultimate goal of any educator, to have a lasting impact on kids. I know that I have. It is my Lifetime Achievement Award. Anyone that knows me knows the truth. And my final comment would be this. I apologize to people like the Stump family. I was told I was not allowed to contact any individual whatsoever. I missed their funeral of their mother. It pains me to say that I couldn't go to that funeral. I miss so many students reaching out to me with issues that they needed to be addressed. Some students have serious anxiety. I was not allowed to contact or have contact with them. I think it was a very, very sad state of affairs. And like I said, I was out of the classroom 36 days. And my name, my children's name, who are educators, I'm just thankful for all of you that came out to support me because I understand the impact that I've had. And I thank you. To the board, I thank you for the opportunity to allow me to speak. Thank you very much.
Anthony Zafiro.
My speech last week was factually accurate. You may not have liked it, but it was accurate. After I left to see my daughter's last marching band concert, which quite frankly was more important than being here, you decided to break your own rules and respond directly, disputing my comments, which you've never done before. I assume it's because I've never left after my speech before. Then, when I respond to you after I returned and after you're adjourned and before you're reconvened, you attempted to silence me. One of you even took your phone out and started recording me like you were going to catch me in some moment of inappropriateness. You didn't. I'm here now with no intentions of going anywhere, so if you'd like to have a debate, do it so to my face and not behind my back. But today I'll focus on one part of my speech, though I invite you to discuss other parts as well. Board Policy 1220, entitled Employment of Superintendent, dictates the procedures which must be followed to hire a new super. That's correct. You followed none of the procedures. That's correct. You claim this policy was changed, yet it is the current policy listed in the handbook, and there's no record of any other current policy. Correct again. So correct that you're scrambling to fix that today. If the policy I just quoted is no longer in effect, then why is it necessary to change it? If the policy, I even did a public records request for an updated policy. Your response? There are no records in accordance with your request. Oh, and by the way, your minutes left out Ms. Claypool's comments that the policy you currently have in the handbook is written as I quoted it. Someone also mentioned that it conflicts with the ORC. On the contrary, ORC states that you have to have a policy in order to hire the superintendent. So what I'm saying is this. If you'd like to break your own rules again and comment directly to me, I'll be here and I'll be expecting your apology. And welcome back, Mr. Rosati.
ORC does trump anything we do in board policies, correct? Thank you. Okay. All right, moving on to routine items.
Yes, routine items number 359, to approve routine matters of the West Geauga Board of Education to include the minutes, certified substitute, and classified substitute.
Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Financial resolution 360, to accept donations. We have 2 donations.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
Yes, we have 2 anonymous donations, one for $15,500 for the West Geauga Middle School Choir. And then we have a second donation, $18,830 for the West Geauga High School Marching Band. These were surprising to get such a large donation. And I want to thank Mr. Branch for his work in working with this donor and coming up with a list of items that would benefit all of our kids, and particularly with our middle school choir as it's getting started.
Thank you, Mr. Branch and Mrs. DeSapri. Okay. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Resolution 361 to approve the then and now certificate.
So moved. Second?
Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Resolution 362 to approve the November 30th five-year forecast.
So move.
Second?
Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Resolution 363 to approve the warrants for the October 2024 school year.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Thank you.
Resolution 364 is to approve a change in certified contract. This is for certified salary movement for the 24-25 school year.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Resolution 365 is to approve a certified stipend for work outside of the 24-25 contractual year for the individuals listed.
So moved. Second?
Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Resolution 366 is to approve classified staff appointments for the 24-25 school year.
So move.
Second?
Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Resolution 367 is to approve revised classified contracts for the 24-25 school year.
So move.
Second?
Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Resolution 368 is to accept classified staff retirement.
So move.
Second?
Any discussion? Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Who will I email for all of my issues?
We will miss Mrs. Klukas.
Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Resolution 369 is asking the board to approve unpaid days for the individuals listed.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Resolution 370 is to rescind a supplemental contract for the 24-25 school year.
So move.
Second. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Resolution 371 is to approve service contracts for the 24-25 school year as listed.
So moved. Second?
Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Resolution 372 is to approve job descriptions for medical assistant and licensed practical nurse.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion?
Just to clarify, so these are new positions we approved already, or are these revised job
These are revised
descriptions?
job descriptions, and there's really only one area of difference in the two job descriptions, and that relates to the area of certification. Otherwise, they're
Okay.
pretty much the same.
Thanks.
Call the roll, please.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Resolution 373 is to approve chaperone for the spring 2025 eighth grade trip to Washington DC.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Resolution 374 is to approve the first reading of the policies listed, also replacement of the board policies listed, and deletion of board policy 8450.01, which is masks.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'd like to point out that this basically just opens up the policies for the board to discuss them.
Correct.
And
There'll
the-
be a discussion
There'll
prior
be
to the next.
discussion and questions to the superintendent before the next
And
meeting.
absolutely send me any questions you have that are related, and I
Before
can
they're-
get them back to you individually, and then if you have further questions before the board,
Yeah,
I can
before they're
answer.
truly approved.
Yes,
This is more just a matter of opening the file.
this is opening the file, correct. Thank you.
Call the roll, please.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Resolution 375 is to accept the 2024-2025 annual report to the Board of Education on the topic of nutrition standards in the district.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I just have a question. You know, I was looking at it, and I looked at, it says that these standards are detailed in the board policies. So there were a number of other policies related to this.
That would relate to it because they
That you're
derive the
attesting
standards
to,
from the
yeah. And I
policies.
just was curious, on the wellness one, it says that we have a
Wellness Committee?
a wellness committee that includes parents, students, representatives of the school food authority, educational staff, mental health and social services, school health professionals, et cetera. Do we have that?
Yeah, we do, and this will be one that Scott will be spearheading this year. We did it, the last time we did it was, I know Amy, you were involved with it, but it's a committee that's a cross-sectional committee, as you say, and it's one that is to meet and review it. The thing that they get into oftentimes, which is a misnomer on this, they like to talk about nutrition, which is obviously the food we eat. They like to talk about recreation, and then a lot of them try to get into the mental health component, and I always have to steer them back because it's a separate set of policies, but it deals specifically with nutrition and with recreation, which could include physical education and recess.
Okay.
Yeah, I was
Do
on
you
that
want to be
committee
on
the
it?
last time.
Anybody else want to be on it? I'll be happy to take your names for Scott.
Yeah, and that's
Right.
exactly what happened too, at that last,
Yeah,
when
I
I was on
remember.
it, that's
But
what
we have a committee in place now.
He'll be forming a new one this year. He won't have the same one, but
Right, every year.
he has the names of the people who were on it
Okay.
before. Yeah,
All right,
it's an annual committee.
okay, thanks.
Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Resolution 376 is to approve the proposed West Geauga Marching Band trip to Ireland, December 27th, 2026 through January 2nd, 2027. And that sounds really odd for me to say that. I'll be long gone, but it just sounds really strange. Hopefully not totally long gone, but gone from this position.
You can be a chaperone.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Can't wait. I could be that and a bus driver. I mean, people are recruiting me for some of these jobs
So move.
now.
Second.
Any discussion? Yay?
Do you guys really want to go and take all those kids there?
They're gluttons for punishment.
Well, yeah, not for you, but for the kids.
Mr. Branch enjoys himself too, sometimes. I know, I've seen it, sometimes. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
I got a half a check there. Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you. Resolution 377 is to approve an addendum to the 24-25 Aligned School District Service Agreement between West Geauga Local and the Educational Service Center of the Western Reserve.
So
This is-
move.
Second.
Any discussion?
So this is for a substitute nurse, right? Is that the one? That's what it
This is
says.
the
the one
PD
that's
curriculum.
For curriculum.
Oh, sorry,
First,
the
and
next
then
one
this
is
is-
the, I don't have a question on this one.
Call the roll, please.
Ms. Leavenworth,
Yes,
Mrs. Sherwood,
Yes.
Dr. Beers,
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool,
Yes,
Mrs. Coleman Walsh.
Yes.
Now, Resolution 378 is to approve an addendum to the 24, it says 26, 26 Alliance School Service Agreement between West Geauga Local Schools and the Educational Service Center of the Western Reserve, not to expose my ignorance, but it's a 2-year.
It's a 2-year
Agreement,
contract.
okay.
It's the overall ESC contract, and then.
I may have misspoken on the last one.
You said 26.
Okay. All right.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
so I just, is this new, or have we always had a sub?
Have we had a sub on place from them?
I was gonna say, it seems like we would need to have a sub for,
And we have medical staff in every building for a reason.
Right,
So
which we
when
need.
When we are unencumbered, it's difficult, but it's also very challenging to find a sub.
Okay.
So
So this is new then, that's good.
Yeah, and a lot of this is driven by student need. We have some pretty involved kids.
Okay. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Sherwood,
Yes.
Dr. Beers,
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool,
Yes,
Mrs. Coleman Walsh,
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth.
yes,
Resolution 379 is to approve the owner-contractor agreement between Vasco Sport Contractors and West Geauga Local Schools. This is for the West Geauga turf replacement.
so moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Call the roll,
well,
please.
I do have discussion, sorry. Goes so fast. I read the contract, I just wanna, it says that they'll start in April, I think, and finish in August?
I'm not
Are-
sure the dates. Do you know,
Well, it
Mark?
says, I know it's August that it ends.
Right.
And is that gonna? Well, I mean, I think it's important we have, like, dates, right? I mean, and if they're gonna move, you know, if something happens and they can't have it done before school starts, then do they have to come back to us?
It was my understanding that they give us the window, but we are one of the first on the list, so that our project will be done sooner than others. So this is a window, but our go date is closer to April. And then barring weather or other unforeseen circumstances, they give us the window so that it can be completed. Am I speaking correctly?
The
Turf.
turf.
We're talking about
Sure.
Turf.
the
Turf.
turf.
The turf, I was of the understanding, based upon conversations with the individual who had met with Scott, and I was invited into that meeting, that they were hoping to have it done by early June. Now, I don't know how feasible that is, but that was what he was discussing. Because it was the issue of graduation, he was hoping that we could have graduation here. That ship has sailed, we can't, because of the uncertainties. But are you familiar, Scott, with what the actual timeline is in terms of the dates that they'll be putting this in?
They're looking at a range starting in May and ending by August 1st.
Okay, August 1st. I think it should say that in the contract. And then if it's gonna be delayed, I mean, I think we should be made aware, just because school starts. And I hope they do have it done sooner, but
There's a start date and
things happen.
there's a start date, and there's a typical 6 to 8 weeks, but a lot of times it gets done a little quicker.
Yeah.
We'll have a start date specific, and then we will have a projected end date if nothing else goes wrong, which
Right,
we're hoping, but yes, we will
Weather.
have those specific start dates.
okay, thanks.
Call the roll, please.
Dr. Beers,
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool,
Yes,
Mrs. Coleman Walsh,
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth,
Yes,
Mrs. Sherwood.
Yes.
Resolution 380 is to approve the capital aluminum and glass core proposal. This is for the west doors on the middle school, and the amount's $110,000.
So, second. All
Any
right.
discussion?
I'm sorry, who was first? Kathy.
Yeah, Kathy.
On, Mark, Scott, on the drawings, it looked like, although we referred to this as the west windows, there were also some on the south side as well.
There's two doors that, one door is labeled south, it's actually facing west. I didn't label them, and it's been relabeled now. And then there's one door in the south that we did not replace, that we're gonna replace.
Just kind of incorporating that, so then it'll be done all the way around.
Done completely. It's a different type of door.
Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Claypool,
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh,
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth,
Yes.
Mrs. Sherwood,
Yes.
Dr. Beers.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna need some help from Brandon on this one. This is the resolution to approve the middle school softball as a club sport. Before we place this on the table, could you introduce our coach?
Yes. Yeah.
That was his whole job, was to introduce you.
job.
That was it.
So Nancy, oh, no, it's all.
No. He was just to introduce you, because I struggle with your name, and so I said he'll pronounce it correctly, but he didn't. Thank you.
Nancy's here to talk about club softball, which is another one of the growing middle school sports. I know the numbers were great last year, and they continue to grow along with club baseball at the middle school level.
Yes, thank you, Brandon. So the purpose is to develop middle school athletes' softball skills, teamwork, and confidence, and to prepare them for high school ball play, and to provide equitable opportunities for the girls. The intended outcomes are to improve the fitness level, develop softball skills, enjoyment in team participation, and team identity and team pride, and understanding of advanced softball skills and strategies. Number of students expected to participate. We've had 2 seasons with 20 girls trying out the first year and 22 last year. The final team roster of last year in 2024 was 15 girls, which included 10 7th graders and 5 8th graders. The girls played in 11 games, 3 of them were rained out. The plan of operation is to have a coach, 1 head coach, which would be me, and a parent assistant coach. We'd have a schedule of approximately 12 games, 6 home and 6 away, and we'd be part of the Freeway League, which is an existing league that we have played in for 2 years. Where will we play? There is a new softball field at Mayfield Church on the corner of Mayfield and Caves Road. I'm not sure if it'll be ready in April, but that is one option in addition to Parkside, which is where we have been playing for the last few years. Practices would be 2 to 3 per week in the West G gyms or outside fields. Parents would be asked to provide documentation in final forms for physical exams. Communication with the parents would be through final forms and game changer apps. Parents would be asked to provide the transportation to and from games and practices. Parents would be expected to provide their students with cleats and helmets and face masks and gloves and a bat. And parents would be asked to pay approximately $120 to pay for uniforms, fees, and landscaping for home games. I would be the person in charge. I have been the coach for 2 years here. I've also been the softball commissioner since 2017 for the Recreation Softball League that's here. I was the assistant varsity coach for softball 1 year, and I have my fundamentals of coaching certification from 2011, first aid and CPR in 2023, people activity form in 2024, and FBI BCI background check in 2024.
I'm not sure that you're qualified for this. I'm just kidding. I was joking.
Thank you.
Completely.
He's a good coach, I can attest to.
Okay.
Thank you. I believe that.
Are there any questions?
This is fast pitch, right? Fast pitch?
Yes, fast pitch, yes.
Do we do slow pitch anymore? I'm out of it.
And I will say that Nancy and her coaches and the parents have all worked well with the high school softball coaches to kind of build those 2 programs together to kind of make the transition to high school easier on those kids. So they're introduced to the game at a younger age. They're also introduced to the West G game at a younger age, the West G uniforms and everything like that. So it's important to get those kids at a young age, so we keep those kids here.
Does that, I mean, I know that starting boys early pitching with fast pitch, does that motion cause any problems?
No, it's an underhand pitch, so there's no limitation
So it's all
in
just
the
a
speed.
circular?
Yes. Yep, it's much easier, yes.
Yeah.
So how will
I
this,
would think the shoulder would kind of.
how will this be, how is it funded? Tell me something
So I think
about that.
that's the cost the parents pay,
Yeah, because it's
Parents
a
have
club
to pay?
sport, right?
Yeah, it's a
So
club
so the parents pay 120, approximately. That's what.
And we have mechanism in place?
And there's a process whereby a club sport can, over time, become a regular
Sure.
sport as well. Notice last year, we brought you both the softball as a club sport and
Mm-hmm.
about middle school baseball, correct? And actually, the first time they presented, only softball was prepared, and the same thing happened tonight, really. Only softball was prepared to give you their pitch.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We need a motion still, correct?
So,
Any more discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh?
Yes.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
okay.
Alrighty, so discussion of old business and suggestions to be included on a future agenda. I just wanted to take a minute and, I don't know, I mean, most everybody's gone, but for those people that are still watching, just kind of clarify what the board's role is in, something like what we just went through with one of our teachers. So when there are allegations, the board does not investigate teaching staff. That is left up to building administration to do so. We are left out of the loop unless and until some decision has been made to either continue an unpaid suspension or to terminate employment, and then that would come to the board and we would discuss it at that point. So we have information on what's happening in the investigation, but we don't have all the details because we are not conducting it, nor would we share those details with anybody in the public because it violates privacy and due process and things of that nature. As far as having teaching staff out of the classroom, I think if we were interviewing dozens of students and they were students of that teacher, from a parent standpoint, I would rather my child not be put in a position where they might feel awkward if they had to see the teacher. But I think that that is something that the building administrators are the ones who are making that decision as well, and they are doing everything they can to keep our kids comfortable and safe in a learning environment. So it's from a board standpoint, we didn't do anything with this
No.
other than we were aware that there was an issue going on.
I can't excuse myself. The only thing that I would say is certainly I'm involved in this when I know there needs to be an investigation. So I'm, to some extent, directing the building level administrators as to what course of action they should proceed. So I'm not trying to hide behind any sort of curtain here and say I'm not involved, because I am. But the board gets very limited information, and I think that's important to protect the integrity and the reputation of the person who's under investigation. I can't control what the media gets a hold of or who talks to the media. I just want to make sure that we're not the source of giving information that we should not be giving to the media. And I think that we take that pretty seriously. I'm going to shed a little bit of light on this, I think, in the superintendent's report. We're not to that point yet, but I agree with everything that you've said up to this point. What I do want to clarify is that I'm not a ghost in this. I'm involved in it. So I just wanted that to be clear.
Thank you. I think that was all I have. You're ready for your superintendent.
Okay. Well, there are two topics tonight.
Christina,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I see something on here about middle school handbook. Is that?
That's on there. That's part of my,
Yes.
that's part of my report there, sir.
Right, that was
Okay, then
something
that
I'm
goes
on it.
under,
There's
No,
two.
thank you, Dr. Beers.
There are two main topics. One is the middle school handbook, because if you recall, there was a complaint that the board received. I believe you received it by email. And the complaint basically was a concern where a parent asked for clarification on two items. And it stemmed from the depiction of a gun in a PowerPoint that a student had prepared. And while the student received no discipline for it, the student was advised that probably a better image than a real gun could be used in his PowerPoint. And at that point in time, the parent said, well, what is the guidance? And he specifically addressed two issues in the middle school handbook, which are on page 23. And the one is real easy to address. It talks about, that whole section of the handbook talks about protected speech and then says that there are certain unprotected materials. There are certain areas where kids do not have First Amendment rights in terms of freedom of speech. And it cites in paragraph, or in line item F, it says that protected speech cannot incite violence, advocate the use of force, or urge the violation of law or school regulations. And I think that in this particular case, it may have been, an extreme interpretation of that language by the teacher that resulted in the referral to the office, to the principal. Because in this particular instance, I don't think it was necessarily the best image for the student to portray. If I were the teacher, I would have suggested something that was a little, I think, more compelling and actually more visually on target with what the student was trying to present there. But I don't think in any way the depiction of the gun in that PowerPoint incited violence or advocated the use of force or violated school rules. I mean, we have exceptions for weapons when we talk about theatrical performances. We certainly have, we have exemptions when students want to discuss weapons in the context of a history class or a social studies class, even if they were to, with supervision, bring in a weapon of sorts under supervision. Not that they're bringing in actually sharpened swords, but you can bring in some of those props, so to speak, for either theatrical purposes and or for educational purposes. So in F, I don't think there's anything that needs to be changed. I think the language is fine. I think basically maybe what we need to do is advise instructors and those who are in the classroom to not interpret it to the level where they would call out a student for having a depiction, which clearly is done in the context of instruction in the classroom, okay? The other one's trickier, and that's J. It talks about speech not being protected that promotes, favors, or opposes any candidate for election. And in this particular case, when the parent was communicating his concerns on this one, he said, you know, kids don't shed their First Amendment rights at the courthouse door, basically. And that's based on a court case known as Tinker versus Des Moines, which was a court case that was decided in 1969. No, I was not in high school then. I was too young to be in high school then, haha. I was just waiting for one of you to say it. But it was a case where kids were admonished for wearing black armbands to protest the Vietnam War. And the argument that was made by the school was that it was disruptive of the educational process. And therein, I think, lies the crux of this matter. Speech, if it's political speech that disrupts the educational process, is certainly speech which would not be permitted because kids could be fighting over candidates or utilizing perhaps materials that would be objectionable in a school setting. The last election being a very contentious one, all you had to do was drive around our area here in Geauga County, Cuyahoga County, a lot of different places, and you could see signs out there that I would not want my kids to even be reading. That were graphic, that were crude, that were inappropriate. And that kind of speech obviously could not come into the schools and be left unaddressed. It would have to be addressed. The other tricky part to this, though, the wrinkle, is that the schools are a political zone. The school property is not one where people can campaign. They cannot wear, materials that promote a particular party or particular person. So it's a tough one for me, and I don't have a clear answer for you. Would I say something to a kid who wore a button that said, you know, Joe Jones or Sarah Smith, and it didn't cause any disruption? Perhaps not, but I don't know that I'd be right in doing that. Even as a teacher, I don't know that I would say anything about it. And the point is a good one. Kids can have opinions. Certainly, we have elections in school, and board policy makes allowance for this. We just recently had a very, very hotly contested election at Westwood Elementary where Farmer and Duck were both running for office. Duck won, and some kids had tears and were very upset by this. And I say that sort of tongue-in-cheek because it's true. I mean, the little kids get invested in this. Imagine what it's like for the high school kids when they're talking about real people and real issues, some of which are very, very dear to the kids. So it is something that we have to be careful with. I await, as I will await, your questions relating to board policy next week. Your weigh in on this, because this is a tough one. You know, if I argue from a statutory law case, I can say, I'm not sure that we can really prohibit them from wearing anything that didn't disrupt the educational process that was of political nature. On the other hand, we have other policies that might be affected by this, where we don't want people coming in at football games, for instance, and passing out literature, et cetera. So it's a tough one for me. I will come up with an answer for you. It's not that I have not given it thought. I've given it quite a bit of thought. But I'd like to see where you guys are coming down on this too, because ultimately you're the ones who approve board policy, so. Okay, so next week, when you're sending me your board policy questions, don't forget this one.
Well, yeah, I don't think we want to miss the fact that having the opportunity during an election, you know, we have them every 4 years, general elections, and we don't want to also miss the opportunity, like Westwood did not miss the opportunity to teach something about
Right.
the election process. And I taught junior achievement once. I'm not a teacher, but I did teach junior achievement once. And one of the things I was teaching second graders was about election.
Right.
And it was helpful for me to teach them that there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers. And we want to be good at both. So it was an opportunity to teach that even at that level. So I don't think we want to miss that opportunity. Now, clearly, we don't want to have, you know, fighting, but, you know, good debate is, you know, is great. If I was a teacher, I'd have them pick who you want to debate for and then make them switch. And
I've done that.
I have too.
I think it's
And that's very effective.
often, yeah.
It's a very effective way to teach other people's views. So I mean, and I know you guys know all this, so I get, and I think that parent was trying to get to that
I
point
think
as
that's
well.
what he was asking as well. I
Right,
do too.
and it's not black and white, is it?
No,
It's like,
it's
so,
not.
so good luck with writing that policy.
Thanks. It's hard to capture it in language, you know what I mean? It's like you know what you want to say, but it's hard to boil it down to words that can't be misconstrued. So that's what I'm working on, thinking about it. Okay?
Yes, sir.
The second item for the old business was an update on transportation. We've talked about transportation. We've looked at the things that we're doing. The last time we spoke, I believe we said we had 24 routes. We were looking at adding a 25th and a 26th, and we were tweaking the 24. But Scott and Melody have been working on some issues along with the task force of drivers. And I have to say, if nothing else, this has helped to unify the drivers and get the people who are in the buses to come forth and give us some good ideas. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Melody. She promises this will be brief, but she's got a few updates for you tonight.
Extremely brief. So the first thing that we're working on is Here Comes the Bus. That has been quite a process to get up and going. We're excited that we're actually.
Excuse me, just a minute. Scott, are you picking her up? Okay.
Yeah, and tell us what Here Comes the Bus is. So.
Here Comes the Bus is the app that will show up on parents' phones. It'll tell you that the bus is in range and can, I'll stand up, and tell the parents that we're on our way and about how much longer we should be there. Thank you, Scott.
There you go.
But some of the challenges that we have noticed, I'm going to stand back, that we've noticed is that there's several dead zones in the district. And we have found this out when we were doing head counts, and I've been pulling down whether or not we're picking children up and if they're actually riding to pull them on and off. So we've kind of noticed those dead zones exist. Not anything we can do about it because of cellular service.
You could get Starlink.
Yeah. The other thing that is important to keep in mind with Here Comes the Bus is that it would only be for children that attend West G schools, riding our yellow buses. Anybody that's a private school, anybody that's a SPED student on a van, it won't work for a van because what indicates that the bus has picked up your children is when the barn doors have opened and the barn doors have closed at your residence. So that's the other reason that it won't work for SPED students. It also won't work for our private school students because they don't have Infinite Campus accounts here with our district. So I want to make that very clear to everybody. There are some challenges that we're trying to work through, whether it's additional training for the staff, because keep in mind, this is new for us too, and I've never used an app like this. Sarah did kind of promo it, demo it, and had good results, whereas a few other people did not. Those are a few things that we've noticed there. We have put up a Google form, so as challenges come up with parents, we want to know. We want the feedback, because this is also a learning opportunity for us, so that we can figure out how do we work around it, how do we make it better, and how do we make it functional. The other thing we are looking at is within saving time on the routes. You've made it very clear you want them under an hour, so we're trying to work in that direction. One of the things that a few of our bus drivers came up with is that why don't we take the north end routes and make them end at Lindsay? Brilliant idea, because we were shuttling everybody from Lindsay, bringing them down to Westwood, everybody switching buses, and then having to trek 6 to 8 minutes all the way back up. When I tell you after head counts and we've pulled everything down and I've done all of the data, we are right there knocking on the door of an hour or less. For some routes, that makes a difference. For the south end routes, Russell, Newberry, it's not gonna make a difference because they're gonna start out at Westwood. But some of the buses that 31, 28, so forth, it's gonna make a huge difference for them in the fact that they may be under an hour. The next thing that we're working on right now, we had our first meeting today, is going through the routes in zones. And I'm meeting with each of the drivers in those zones going, okay, you guys have this area, these routes are not under an hour. Let's move some things around, let's rethink about this, how can we make it happen? We're almost there. We are like, when I tell you we are knocking on the door, we are almost there.
That's with the existing routes?
That's with the existing routes. That would also entail some creative routing as far as our private school routes. So we're trying to look how, not to increase their times, but seeing if we can drop them off on the way to Westwood, and then, you know, if there's a couple left over, we can get them moved up into those neighborhood buses so that we have one of the St. Anselm buses and one of the Notre Dame buses helping out with the elementaries. Because the problem really isn't the overall AM and PM routes, it's the PM elementary. So we're trying to think about how to problem solve that out. And then the next thing, the next thing we have is recruitment. Without the people, obviously we can't move the kids like we need to for athletics or anything else. Our first recruitment event that we had was in June. And at that recruitment event, we had 5 people come out and said, yes, I want to be a bus driver. I want to train. This is what I want to do. In the end, we only had 1 successful candidate that went all the way through. And if you noticed on our West Geauga transportation page, he just finished maybe a week ago. So if that gives you a timeline from June to now, that's how long it takes to train somebody brand new. It can be shorter or it could be longer, but it's normally about this time frame. In October, we had another Drive the Bus event, same thing as we did in June, and we had 6 candidates come out. We started out with 5, and now we're down to 4. Some of the challenges with that is that background checks, whether they can pass physicals. One other thing, going back to the routing that we're working on, some of the drivers, and I've had some of the parents call in, saying to me, you know, I understand you want my route to be under an hour. We love our bus driver. And if it means we have to stay on the bus for an hour and 10, 15 minutes, we want to do that. We don't want to be switched. So there are some unintended challenges behind this. Not only that, please keep in mind, and I've got a few names for this too, where they've called and said, you know what, when you put these routes out, I didn't have to get daycare. The bus came before I leave for work, and unfortunately, we're their babysitter. And at this point, I can tell you from my own experience, to get a daycare provider is going to be impossible for them. So those are some other things that me and the task force are keeping in mind, that, you know, we have some parents that are working and the routes are already out there. They said, you know, if next year I have to deal with it, at least I've got some time in the summer. But please, keep this in mind for me. I know my neighbor wants it less, but I just can't. Okay, that's it for me.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for Melody at all? Good with-
Do we have any board reports? Okay, we're going to,
Hang on, am I on that one too, with the board reports, or superintendent's report is where?
Yeah.
Thought it was, it's right here, right?
Mhm.
Okay, I listened to everyone tonight, and I understand that this investigation has been a tough one for people. I truly do. I think it's probably been toughest for Mr. Rosati, because he was the one who was sort of under the under the spotlight on all this. There are certain things, though, that I feel need to be said that will put this into some sort of focus for people. I'm glad it's done. I want to dot the I, cross the T on this and have it done. So I wrote something out tonight that maybe will answer some of the questions and maybe will explain some of the details that people are wondering about. Just says the following: the investigation into potential misconduct within the West Geauga High School football program is concluded. The investigation did not stem from a concern expressed by any of the administrators. However, the administrators were compelled to investigate the complaints once they were raised. To suggest that this investigation was the result of a stolen football is absurd. The investigation was a thorough process that involved the scheduling and conducting of interviews with over 30 individuals, the written documentation of those interviews, the discovery and review of relevant video, and the accommodation of the schedule of one of Mr. Rosati's attorneys. Complaints that the process was unnecessarily prolonged would be unfounded and inaccurate. The amount of evidence compiled indicates otherwise. I do not envy our administrators at the building level for conducting this. I know it was hard on them. They both have had, particularly with Ryan, he's had a long relationship with Mr. Rosati. It's never easy to do an investigation like this. It's harder when you know the person. So I just wanted to clarify that tonight and let people know that there was no attempt to make this a more painful process than it needed to be made.
Once the allegation was brought forward, you were obligated.
We had to,
we had
yes. Thank you, that's it.
And these are, it's all public record at this point, correct? So
Everything
if
is-
there were
everything is public record.
questions about what the investigation yielded, one need only reach out to request public records of the investigation.
Correct.
Sorry, Mrs. Pavlet.
But we're very limited in what we will say individually. But if, as you say, if people want to make public records requests, that's their right to do.
Right, obviously, we would redact all
We would
student
redact any
information.
student identifications, yes.
Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Board, do we have anything to report? Okay, so we are going to adjourn into executive session to discuss personal matters, investigation of charges and/or complaints. We are going to be asking Dr. Markward and Mr. Patty to come in and, do I mention? We will also have Anthony Zafiro, and eventually we will be calling Sarah Thrasher and Kelly Clamp.
And I'll be joining you as well.
Oh, and, yes, sorry, Karen Pavlet's
Okay.
also going to be in there. So we have a motion to adjourn into executive session. Call the roll, please.
Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh? All right, we'll be meeting next door.
Oh, and there will be no action after Okay, my mic is on.
Mine doesn't work.
My button works.
My button doesn't work. Our batteries died.
We'll just talk.
Oh.
We'll talk really
We'll talk really loud.
Whose does work?
Mine's working. I had to switch mine off and on the back,
That's what I had to do.
and then I pushed the button. There.
That works.
Ready?
There you go.
Okay, so we are reconvening at 10:26 PM. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Mrs. Sherwood?
Yes.
Dr. Beers?
Yes.
Mrs. Claypool?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman Walsh? Yes. Ms. Leavenworth?
Yes.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Check your calendars, I'll send you a calendar invite, December 2nd.